I recognise the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased after 27 years of working together you're able to do that. Mr Speaker, I do want to acknowledge your service to this Parliament and say that if this is the last bill that you're dealing with, it is something which is appropriate given the fact that you are yourself a proud parent of an international athlete, and I want to acknowledge that, acknowledge you, and to thank you. Mr Speaker, I am going to ask for a little bit of indulgence to wish a couple of teams all the best. I want to say that the Commonwealth Games team, I think, is going exceptionally well. I follow the cyclists, and clearly what has happened is that in the last decade or a bit more, as there has been less doping, New Zealand athletes have been doing better and better at cycling relative to the rest of the world, and I think that is something which is really good. Mr Speaker, I want to wish all the best to the Black Ferns who are about to enter into their World Cup, and say to Fee and the team, you're in Paris. When I last watched a World Cup, it was in Edmonton. And I know where I would rather be. Edmonton was an awful hole in the cold and the snow when the World Cup was there. I want to wish Jackie Patev, who is the second Wainuiomata, Black Fern, all the best, Claire and Kelly and Kat, all of whom I was touch judge to over a period of years when they were playing in Otago. I sort of regard them as like my own kids. I've watched them grow and develop into great rugby players. And to Linda Aitunu, who's my bodyguard on occasions, my +1 for this year's Steinlagers, I just would hate to be anyone who was tackled by her. One of the hardest tacklers I've ever seen. Mr Speaker, with a little bit more indulgence, I'd like to refer to another major sporting event which is occurring, a historic event at the Hutt Recreation Ground this Sunday when Hutt Old Boys Marist play Wainuiomata. Now, one thing that we know is that this one is going to be so hard fought that there would never be any suggestion of match fixing in it. Mr Speaker, the people out there know that I have strong family links to the Hutt. I again was a touch judge for several years for one of the Hutt teams, and in fact, not much over a decade ago, had to turn out for a senior second team in an emergency when the alternative was the coach who had concussion playing for them. Mr Speaker, I think it's fair to say that all I did was run up and down the 15-metre line asking them not to give me the ball, but of course they did every now and again. There's a history of people going over the hill between Wainuiomata and the Hutt. The earliest example I know of is Karapukatapu, who was a Wainuiomata resident, a very, very good rugby player, but he unfortunately used to play for Petone. Currently there's the Risdon brothers, Wainuiomata residents, family, prominent Wainuiomata family, both parents and grandparents. Piriwepu actually played for Hutt Old Boys Marist before he played for Wainuiomata, and probably played more games against Wainui than he played for Wainui against the Hutt. So there's a history of people going over the hill. But, Mr Speaker, for the first time, these two teams are going to meet in a Jubilee Cup final. That is the premier final for Wellington, and for Wainuiomata it is our first time in that, since the club was formed in 1946. So as a local resident, as someone who's followed the team for a number of years, who has watched some great young men develop into great rugby players, I want to wish them all the best and say, notwithstanding my family contacts, I'll be calling out for Wainuiomata. Mr Speaker, just to make clear, we are talking about a match-fixing bill, and it applies to sport, it applies to racing, And notwithstanding the comments of the colleague to my left, it does not apply to the Oharu or the Epsom electorate. And where, I mean, if it did apply, I think it's fair to say there'd be some questions, because people are going into a race saying, please don't vote for me. Mr. Speaker, I would generally be absolutely opposed to that, other than the fact that my very good friend and colleague, Holly Walker, in Hutt South is taking a very similar approach. And I just want to say that I've therefore got slightly mixed feelings about people who are running in an electorate and are saying, give us the party vote, but not the electorate vote. Mr. Speaker, the bill itself makes a minor but an important change. It makes it very clear that match fixing is a crime. I think arguably, looking at the face of the legislation, match fixing is probably already a crime. But what this does, it puts it beyond any doubt whatsoever, and it is being done in time for the football under-23s and for the Cricket World Cup, both of which are not far off as far as we're concerned. I do want to thank the Minister for his consultation. Like most legislation in the sport area, it is something that we do on a bipartisan basis wherever possible. And even though this is relatively minor, it does do the trick, and therefore we will be supporting it. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased that the Minister has chosen not to go as far as organisations like the IRB have gone in their draft rules. My view is that the draft rules of the IRB are nuts. Mr. Speaker, to take an extreme example, using Tiriwepu and his mum, theoretically, if I have a cup of tea with Tiriwepu's mum, I'm not allowed to then go and bet on a sporting match. And that seems to me to be the sort of, because there is a relationship between him and his mother, obviously, his mother and me, one of friendship, and because that relationship would be caught by the IRB rules, and I think that is something which goes far too far. Mr. Speaker, I regret this bill has taken so long to get in. We sort of knew from about October of last year that it was coming. I regret the fact that it's been relatively low on the government's priority as far as passing is concerned, but we will support it. If there's a requirement, and I think there probably should be a requirement for a shortened select committee period. I don't think we need to do it as part of the motion in this House, but we will facilitate it through the select committee after the election. And Mr. Speaker, I hope as a result of that, it is passed before Christmas, and the rules will be very clear before the cricket, because I think, as all of us know, there is more money bet on cricket than any other sport in the world by quite a large factor. Mr. Speaker, we support the bill, we support our Commonwealth Games team, we support the Black Ferns, and we support Wainuiomata. Thank you.
I call the